What's going on, everyone? Tayler Kyles, Mike Kadlick, Brian Hines, and Alex Barth here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily Ex-Pats Beat, brought to you by our good friends at PrizePicks and GameTime. As you can see, another crossover episode, this time a mailbag. Usually we come together for draft stuff or, spring practices, but now we are coming together to answer the good people's questions. This should be a good one. We got a lot of good questions on deck. But first, guys, before we get into it, how we doing? I know there's a lot of stuff going on in Boston sports, so let's start. Mike, you, Brian next, and then Alex last. And what's going on today, guys? Fill everybody in.
Yeah, crazy Boston Sports Day, which we'll get to at the end with a classic Pats Beat Boston Sports Minute. I've been moving all weekend, so if there's bags under my eyes, I apologize if you're just listening to the podcast and you don't get to see that, but I also have a new background. Besides that, trudging through the off season and getting ready for camp, and we're officially in camp month. It's now July 1st, so we have camp towards the end of the month, which is exciting.
Yeah, busy day, busy Boston day, tons of Celtics, Bruins stuff. We'll talk about it, but counting down the days, what are we at, 4 weeks or 3.5 weeks till training camp, something like that. So we're almost there. We are almost there, but busy stuff for the meantime.
Yeah, a lot going on today. Honestly, I think haven't thought a ton about the Patriots today because I went in planning to get some early training camp stuff done, and then obviously between the Bruins and the Celtics, it's been quite a day.
Yeah, and we will get more into those later. But for now, obviously, we're here for a Patriots mailbag. So let's get into some Patriots mailbag questions. Starting with this one up top. Actually, we may be able to do this format. There we go. We got the bottom. That looks like it makes sense.
Now.
We were debating before the show.
Am I the only one who doesn't see Alex?
No, he's gone. We were just powering through it.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
hang on.
Alex,
I'll try to fix it.
That's fine. I wanted to make sure. My camera.
It's okay, buddy. You got time. Mike, you're up first. So, starting off with, how much, if at all, should trading Brandon Ayuk or CeeDee Lamb impact Drake Maye's timeline? For anyone who doesn't know, Ricky, who we all admire very greatly for his insights in the scoop game, the People's Insider, reported today that CeeDee Lamb is going to request a trade if he doesn't get an ideal offer from the Cowboys. Absolute insanity that a 25-year-old receiver who is absolutely in the top 5 at his position in the NFL is just getting dragged right now for a contract. Same with Ayuk, but even more for CD. It seems pretty crazy. Mike, we'll start with you first. What do you think about the potential for a CeeDee Lamb trade? What would you be willing to give up? All that good stuff. And how would you think it would affect Drake Maye's timeline if he does get really that bona fide number 1 receiver?
Yeah, I feel like anywhere from 3 weeks, every 6 weeks, I somehow work into whether it's a column or an article or a tweet that the Patriots need to go get a wide receiver. So I feel like I'm always kind of giving this rant, whether it's on this show or elsewhere. It was the basis of my Sunday column this week on CLNSmedia.com because of more of the Ayuk stuff that came out last week where he officially had his meeting with the 49ers and, all that stuff. I think it should be high on the priority list. I really do, especially with CeeDee Lamb. He's, in my opinion, I think almost everybody's opinion, probably a better player than Ayuk. He's younger. He has more of a higher ceiling. And look, if he's available, the Patriots should pounce. Anytime there's a wide receiver on the trade market, the Patriots should be at least in conversations. If they're not even at a minimum calling to see what it's worth, that just feels like malpractice to me. They've obviously drafted 2 young wide receivers in Javon Baker and Jalen Polk, who they hope to sort of grow into those wide receiver ones, but that's not what they are right now. So they should be involved. And as far as Drake Maye and the timeline, if you can get a number 1 guy here, that has sort of accelerated all of these other young quarterbacks' timelines, I guess, kind of the way they play. You look at, your Josh Allen, your Tua Tagovailoa. Joe Burrow had, it was a little different because they drafted Jamar Chase, but you pair these guys up with that sort of true 1A wide receiver, and it gives them, a security blanket and a guy to throw to. So on both of those fronts, I think they should be in on any wide receiver that comes up, and I think ultimately it's going to obviously help Drake Maye in the long run.
Yeah, look, we'll see if he's actually available. I just don't understand where the Cowboys are at to move him right now. They've got to win. That team has to win. Mike McCarthy has to win. Frankly, Jerry Jones has to win. And if that means you play him out on the final year of his deal and then franchise him and trade him or something like that, They should be in no rush to move on from him. I'd love CeeDee Lamb in New England. I do think he's a better option than Brandon Ayuk, certainly. But I don't think I'll say the same thing I've said with Ayuk. Like, it's not, eventually they need to get one of these guys, but if you can't treat every name that becomes available like he's the last train out of the station. You got to understand wide receivers. There's a ton of talent in the league right now at that position, and guys are becoming available left and right. You look at the guys who project to be available next year, McLaurin and DK Metcalf. So I'd like to see him get, I mean, CeeDee Lamb is probably the best wide receiver of any I just named. I think it's him and Metcalf at the top. I'm sorry. I know you guys love Ricky, and he had another report out there that, damn, I want it to be true so bad. You guys know which one I'm talking about. But I don't know. I don't think Lamb becomes available this offseason. Good chance he becomes available at some point. Maybe we revisit him in his case in the future. It just doesn't add up to me right now.
Yeah, I still think this is a next offseason type of thing, right? Like, you hope Maye looks good this year, then you go get your big piece. And I don't see the Niners or Dallas making a move like these guys while their championship window is wide open. So I think that's kind of a next offseason thing, especially with, you have Jalen Polk, you have Javon Baker. Take this year, see what you have in those guys, then maybe you don't even need one of those guys next year. So I think that's for next offseason. And, if that's impacting Maye's timeline, like, I don't really see that. I think that's more like the offensive line. If any position is impacting Drake Maye's timeline, I think what they have right now is honestly like good enough to throw him out there and hope he can kind of elevate that group. But yeah, I still think, if these guys are one of these, DK Metcalf is someone Bar's talked about a lot. Like, that's a next offseason move to go add that true alpha number one that we've been wanting and kind of slot everyone else in behind him.
I think everybody made great points. At the end of the day, one, like we said, if CD is even available, you got to do your due diligence. Of all the players that have been floated, like, CD is different. We love Brandon Ayuk. I think on both these podcasts, been very vocal about it, but CeeDee Lamb also gives you size that Ayuk doesn't bring. So I think that's kind of the little extra step where it's like, if he's available, I wouldn't be mad if the Patriots gave up, significant draft capital and then spent money. But at the same time, you can also use that first round pick, like you guys mentioned, on a wide receiver that you want to develop, be cost controlled, and be that alpha who can contribute quickly. Of course, having a true number one wide receiver who you can throw the ball to in those one-on-one matchups and have confidence in every single play, that's going to make any quarterback more comfortable. But, it's still going to be a learning curve for Drake Maye. But I think, Brian, you kind of hit it on the head. He has enough guys like with Baker, with Polk, with Pop. I think as he learns to grow with these guys, they may not all, have huge roles, but I think that's a receiving core where you're comfortable with him growing with those guys, getting experience. If they had a bona fide number one, that's awesome, but I just think it's not as much of a need right now, especially considering where they're at in the team's development. All right, next up, how much better than Jacoby Brissett does Drake have to be to start week one, even if the offensive line is bad, which is something we've kind of mentioned, whether or not the offensive line is a significant factor in whether or not Drake Maye plays. Mike, what do you think?
If he is just as good as Jacoby Brissett, you play him. I don't think he even has to be better. I think as soon as he shows that he's equivalent, he should end up being your guy, because at that point, there's really no point in playing Brissett. Like, I understand that you want to sort of, develop him behind the scenes and what have you, but if there ever comes a point where not only is Maye better, put it this way, if Maye looks better in camp and looks better in practice and things like that, players are going to be pissed that they're not playing the best quarterback. So if they're neck and neck, just throw the kid out there again, because of, and not, I shouldn't say just throw him out there as if it's like not a calculated decision, but if they're one and the same as far as quarterback play, just put the young guy out there, because there's no point in having Jacoby anymore. Right now, he's a stopgap. He's a bridge until Maye is ready. So if he's ready on the same level, I'm playing Drake Maye.
I think we the important thing to remember here, because and I hate to be the wet blanket in this, and that's where this show misses Evan, is usually it's really exciting to think about Drake Maye coming in and being the starter. But the reality is, once you make that move, whether it's in week 1, whether it's in week 5, whether it's in week 10, that's it. He's the starter. And if you put him out there week 1 and suddenly realize, and remember, it's so hard to evaluate offensive line play. Any team, this isn't just a Patriots thing, any team, it's so hard to evaluate, tangibly evaluate offensive line play in training camp and in the preseason because of the rules and limited opportunities. So I don't think we'll really know what the Patriots offensive line, I don't think they'll truly know what kind of shape their offensive line is in week one. I think it's going to be about a month of moving things around and figuring things out as it was last year and as it has been for other teams. Once you put Drake Maye out there, that's it. And if you put him out there week one and you suddenly realize we're going to get this kid killed, now you're between a rock and a hard place. Because, yeah, you can pull him, but now you're benching your first-round quarterback, and we just did that. And we all know what that looks like. And, yes, us, the people who know what's going on, will sit here and say they benched him because of the line, or they benched him because of or they pulled him because of this, and it's not, they don't believe in him, but you create a ton of unnecessary outside noise, which, again, those teammates aren't going to like either. So will players maybe be annoyed if they think Drake Maye is the better option? He's not out there. I understand that. I think to put up with it for a month while you get the offensive line figured out is within reason. It's if they're using the same starting five week in and week out, and we get to late October and early November, and the line's clearly as good as it's going to get, and Jacoby Brissett is still out there, that's where those frustrations come in. But week one, I just think there's too many unknowns in week one to add the unknown of Drake Maye. I would rather get all the unknowns figured out. And that doesn't mean the offensive line has to be great. I just want to know what it is. I just want to know exactly how bad it's going to be. And I don't think realistically you're going to know that week one. I just want to get that question answered before I put him out there.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Alex there. And that's coming from someone who is so high on Drake Maye. And I think he's going to be
you should want Jacoby off the team, shouldn't you, Brian?
No, I don't. But I think, again, we're going to get out on the field during training camp, and Drake Maye is going to be the best quarterback out there, right? But I think they might even say it, as Barth was just saying, let's just take a month here and kind of take a step back, and we'll see how the offensive line looks after 4 or 5 weeks. Also, none of these rookies have ever played a 17-game season, right? They play 12 games in college, 12, 13 games. You saw that with Mac, his rookie year. He had a really good start, and then they had that bye, and then they fell off that last month. So that's something, too, they might kind of take into account the big picture here. Do you want to end potentially his rookie year going downhill, where maybe we give him 11, 12 games, and now he's ending the rookie year on the high note? So I think he's going to be the best quarterback in camp, but I still think he'd have to be steps and steps above Jacoby Brissett for them to, and the line would have to look good too for them to kind of make that move in week one there right out of the gate.
I think when it comes to Drake versus Jacoby, it's ultimately going to come down to, can Drake at least do the base level things the way Jacoby can? Can he get the offense in the right situation? Can he make checks when he needs to? Can he get the plays out correctly? Because it's a West Coast offense. We know it's very difficult for some young guys to get all that different verbiage out. If he can do the procedural things on the same level as Jacoby and isn't making glaring mistakes, I don't understand why you wouldn't put him in there. Obviously, Jacoby said, but then, of course, the offensive line is a factor. Now, I agree, Alex. Actually, Brandon Thorne episode going to drop tomorrow on the channel. I asked him point blank, how much can you glean from an offensive line guru? How much can you learn from these spring practices? He said, outside of lineups, nothing. There's really nothing you can learn because these guys aren't going in pads. There's a lot of things that work against them. So we're really going to have a better idea, like you said, Alex, not a great idea because there are limitations, but a better idea once we see the pads on. So if it's a disaster up front, then I do think that has to be in consideration because you don't want him to develop bad habits. But if we see this offensive line like we saw, where it's an interior of City, David Andrews, and then Mike Nwenu, I'm more comfortable with that because bad tackle play is obviously not ideal. But Caden Wallace, again, in speaking with Brandon Thorne, that was a guy that he said with good coaching can probably be someone who contributes pretty early for you. And then if Chooks is your, weak link, not the best thing in the world, but a guy like Drake Maye can make that work. But if you're getting interior pressure really quickly, you're screwed. So if they do have the same lineup that we saw, or at least it's consistent, I would have more confidence in putting him out there. But again, it's going to be, can you do the procedural things and keep the offense on schedule similar to Jacoby Brissett? Make some mistakes, but obviously the upside is going to be higher with Drake out there. And can the offensive line be good enough that he's not getting pressured so fast that he's not being able to really sit there and really grow on the field and start to develop bad habits? More excellent questions coming for y'all. But first, quick word from our friends at PrizePicks. Be right back. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. With the NBA Finals over, the hoops action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is just heating up, with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves, alongside greats like Breanna Stewart and Asia Wilson. You can earn up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. If you have the skills, you can play for a shot at turning your $10 into $1,000. I've got Caitlin Clark for more than 3.5 3-points made and Breanna Stewart for more than 23 points. For baseball, I've got Kyle Schwarber for more than 9-hitter fantasy score and Bryce Miller for more than 4 pitcher strikeouts. Download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, so getting into the Patriots' actual receiving core. Do you think the Patriots will ever find a true wide receiver one, or will they have a wide receiver room similar to Green Bay's, where there's no alpha, but anyone can go off any week? And I think it was CJ Stroud, was it, that had a comment where he was saying, like, if you don't have a true number one, it makes it harder on the defense, which conceptually you can understand. Like any quarterback, like Brady, his receivers say he was so good at this, is distributing the ball. Because sure, you know, if you have like a prime Stephon Diggs, someone like that, you want to feed that guy. But if you have other weapons where it's like, sure, you can double him, but then we have 3 other guys that are legitimate options, it makes it harder on the defense. So this time, Brian, we'll start with you. What do you think?
Well, I hope they eventually at some point find a true wide receiver one. But this year, yeah, I could see this kind of shaking out like Green Bay, because they don't have that true alpha right now. Like, you know, maybe Jalen Polk kind of develops into that, or Javon Baker, we'll see. But they don't have that right now. So, yeah, take this as like a game plan. Maybe 1 week it's a Javon Baker week, 1 week it's a Pop Douglas week, 1 week it's a Hunter Henry week, right? Like, keep throwing different things at opponents and kind of use that depth, use that versatility, try to use that to your advantage without that, you know, true number one in your room right now.
Mike, what do you think?
I am going to kind of 180 from the number one wide receiver talk I've been, you know, throwing out there for the last 3 years. But I also don't hate looking at it this way, because you look at that Green Bay room, right? And it's Christian Watson and Jaden Reed and I don't know why I can't think of Wicks, and like I can't think of everybody else in that room right now. Romeo Dobbs, like they're all twos, but they're really high end twos, and it worked for Green Bay last year. Like, and now take, you know, Mike Tannenbaum and what he says with a grain of salt on ESPN, but like he has continuously been like Jordan Love is one of the best quarterbacks besides Patrick Mahomes in the league right now. And I have to agree with him at some instances. And like, that's because he's had a solid wide receiver core around him the last year, and also kind of developed with those guys behind the scenes when Rodgers was still there. And so look, if that continues to be successful in Green Bay and the Patriots kind of built, like you look at Demario Douglas and Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, even a guy like KJ Osborne they brought in, if it works, it just works. And you might not even have to shell out all that money, and you can pay all the guys what you're paying them now and kind of rotate it through that way. So look, I'm not saying don't go get one. I've obviously touted going to get a true number one forever. But I mean, if it works and the offense runs smoothly, then you might not have to shell out all that money for one either.
Yeah, I don't know. Wasn't the Green Bay offense better though when they had Devontae Adams? Wasn't that a better version?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yes,
even the games that Rodgers was hurt, Adams was always effective. And what you're describing there, Taylor, off the top, and what CJ Stroud said, and I understand why he would say that. Like from a quarterback point of view, it makes sense, especially for a rookie. But what you're describing there is Ewing theory, which is essentially it's an old basketball concept from the 80s that the Knicks in the 80s, when they had Patrick Ewing, and he was like the only good player on the team. Like they had other good players. He was like the superstar. It was Patrick Ewing and everybody else, right? And when Ewing would get hurt, the Knicks would go on these stretches where they'd be really good because nobody knew what they were going to do because they didn't have Patrick Ewing. And there was this element of unpredictability. The problem with that is there's a shelf life to it, because at a certain point, the spreading the ball becomes predictable. And if you can just cover everybody, right, eventually you're going to run up against a team that can just cover everybody, plain and simple. And I think you can get by for a little bit with that philosophy. And it may be even like for what the Patriots are now, you can get by for this year with that philosophy. But the evidence shows us all of these quarterbacks are taken to another level when they get this kind of receiver. Even Mahomes was helped tremendously by Tayler Kyles. And the other thing I see people say, well, the Patriots, even when they won in the latter portion of the dynasty in the modern era, they didn't have a true number one receiver. No, but they had Rob Gronkowski. So that, if you have the best tight end in football, I guess, yeah, you don't need a coverage dictating wide receiver. Hunter Henry is a good player. He's far from that. So I do think they need to get this guy eventually. I just don't think it's this massive undertaking that everybody makes it out to be. It's going to be expensive. It's going to cost. It's going to be a wow moment. But I said it before, I don't think there's any position in the league as oversaturated in talent as there is at wide receiver. And eventually these guys become available because there just isn't room for all of them to get paid by their current teams. I have this theory. We can kind of go a little deeper into football theory here. And I brought this up before once, like a year ago, and it's still kind of a take in progress. If this trend continues, because the way these, the youth pipeline right now and kids doing 7-on-7 camps where, when we played Pop Warner, you were just running the ball. That's all you did because, kids couldn't throw because you couldn't block and all that. Now they play 7-on-7.
Couldn't throw.
Kids are developing as route runners from the time they're in like 4th or 5th grade. It's a wide open game. They go to the college level where it's a wide open game that favors them. The rules make it easier for them. I wonder if this trend continues, we get to a point where the league becomes so oversaturated with elite wide receivers that the wide receiver market kind of mirrors the running back market, what it is now. And I'm not saying that wide receivers will suddenly start making chump change and never getting re-signed, but I don't understand entirely how economies work. Like, I think I got like a B- in econ in college, but I understand how supply and demand works. And if there's more than 32 coverage dictating wide receivers, those guys really are not going to be as expensive as they are right now. So at a certain point, you have to make the move, and you're going to have to give up a solid draft pick, a top 50 draft pick, at least. You're going to have to give the guy a big contract. If you don't find him in the draft, even if you find him in the draft, you're still going to have to give him the contract. Like, that's all going to have to happen at some point. But the question of, will they ever get one? Do they need to getting one is going to be doable without disrupting the whole process. So in that case, you might as well do it. Even if you don't need one, you might as well. And there certainly will be opportunities to do so. I think plenty of opportunities. I think the real challenge in this, and I'm sorry to go on a rant here, but this is something I saw this question earlier. I thought it was a really good question. The real challenge in this is not getting the deal done or even finding an opportunity to do the deal. To me, the challenge is threading the needle of what is the right time and knowing, right? So, okay, Brandon Ayuk, we think might be available. CeeDee Lamb might be available. DK Metcalf might be available next year. There's been rumors about Amari Cooper. There's been rumors about Devontae Smith, right? All these different guys. How do you know which one is the right guy to spend those assets on? Because you don't want to go too early and miss out on a better option. You don't want to pass on a guy thinking you might get somebody better and then suddenly realize that one specific receiver is no longer available, even if multiple receivers of the type are. That's the challenge here for me, is threading the needle. But they can do it, and I absolutely think they should do it. It's just a matter of when and how.
So speaking of the wide receiver theory, it is interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's different than the running back market because, a big reason the running back market is so depreciated is because of the injuries.
Sure. It's not apples to apples.
Of course. I'm just I'm literally just thinking it through kind of live. But also, I feel like with receivers, I think the wide receiver 2-3 market could depreciate because there's so many good ones. But the elite guys, they're different. The consistency and being able to go in every single week and not even just dictate, but also produce like a true number, like with Javon Baker. I think he has the skill set and the mentality to be a similar kind of guy in that, kind of echelon, maybe lower end for sure. Because I don't think he has a dynamic talent on top of that kind of mentality where it's just like, yeah, this guy is just completely different. But I see what you're saying.
Well, yeah, let me just the elite of the elite will always be, right? For Tyreek Hill, you're going to have Derrick Henry, right? Like that's always going to be a thing. But it's more so like we've started to see it. These teams would rather trade the proven commodity and not give the contract, acquire draft assets, and then go to the draft and hope to replace them, right? We saw, and it worked with mixed results, and that's kind of what this hinges on, right? You know, for I'm trying to think of an example, right? So, you know, moving on.
AJ Brown and Treylon Burks.
AJ Brown, Treylon Burks.
AJ Brown, you could argue that was a mistake on the Titans' part. Like, they looked really bad for doing that. And then with the Chiefs, with Tyreek Hill, they did that because Travis Kelce is a number one receiver, not a wide receiver.
And also a guy in Sky Moore never developed into anything.
Like, work when you trade those guys away.
Well, that's what I think this is going to come down to. I don't think this is happening yet. It's something I think could happen because teams are poking around with it and they're trying it. And all it's going to take, let's say Ricky Pearsall turns out to be a dude, right? It's copycat league. Mm-hmm. Suddenly a bunch of teams are going to be trying to do that. So, look, ultimately the point, that was kind of a separate thing that I just thought was relevant to the conversation that I thought you guys might find interesting. Ultimately, it comes down to whether you want to talk about Brandon Ayuk, whether you want to talk about Amari Cooper, whether you want to talk about CeeDee Lamb, like, every time we think this is the end of these great receivers becoming available, here's 3 or 4 more of them that are suddenly up for trade. So the Patriots need to hit that mark at some point. I think it's probably a little early right now, but they need to hit that mark at some point. And I would hate it if they were like as good as the Packers wide receiver room is right now. It'd be that much better if they had Devontae Adams, and Jordan Love's life would be that much easier if he had Devontae Adams. And those guys are gettable. And the Patriots are going to have the assets and the flexibility to add that kind of guy. Not doing it out of some belief that we can create him in the aggregate, that math BS, that would suck. I still think they should go out and add that guy.
Yeah, I'm not mad this went overall because this is a very interesting conversation. Yeah. I guess for me, specifically for the Patriots, I think it comes down to Drake Maye, to be totally honest with you. Like, great quarterbacks can elevate the talent around them. But even with Brady, if we want to go 2016, when he didn't have Gronk, he still had Jules, who for their scheme was their wide receiver one. He did a lot of things for them. He did things after the catch. Like, he was just someone who's productive. But also, whenever you would see those kind of like 2010s offense of Brady where it kind of starts to look not so great, it was when they were missing multiple guys. Like, if you had Jules, Amendola, and James White, but you didn't have Gronk, it was okay. You could still control the middle of the field because you had 3 guys who all, like, especially we hear now that, you know, that whole era is over about Brady and how much work they put in, where they're coming in on Saturdays, and like the margin for error is greater for them because they are so fine-tuned. So especially like with the Mac Jones era, I feel like last year I was too dependent on, they have a lot of 2s, but like if Mac distributes the ball, it's fine. I now kind of in retrospect, one, like that's just such an outlier for a situation. It's not great to compare it to.
You can't compare anybody to Tom Brady. It's that it's kind of comes down to
Mac Jones, right? Because that was such a
the last 2 years of the Patriots.
Right. Yeah. But it's still, no matter what quarterback it is, they still benefit greatly from having that true number one guy where it's like the offense runs through them. But if you have those complementary guys, that's where it's like, damn, we have a hard time stopping them because we double this guy, but now anybody else is on the table. So still a very good conversation. I think they'll get a wide receiver one at some point, whether someone emerges as that or if they decide, you know, after this season, we really need to get that guy to bring this all together. It'll happen. I think we understand this regime is prioritizing Drake Maye's development. If they think he needs it, and especially if he shows something this year, they're going to be able to get it. Wide receivers want to play with good quarterbacks. And if he's very good, you still have to pay these guys, but I think it'll be easier. All right, let's take a breather. Quick word from our friends over at GameTime. Be right back.
Nothing says summer quite like a live baseball game. And whenever I want to check out a Red Sox game at Fenway, I'm using GameTime, the best place for last-minute deals on tickets. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. With GameTime, it's as easy as finding the game you want to attend, getting a view of the entire stadium to see what prices look like in different areas, and they actually do you a favor and show you both the cheapest tickets available and the best deals. You can also get the view from the seat that you pick, and between their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and job loss protection, there's really no better option than GameTime. And with GameTime's lowest price guarantee, the app will actually credit you 110% of the difference if you find a cheaper ticket elsewhere. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right. Could the Caden Wallace move, that means him really playing right tackle? He was the backup in practices at left tackle before the last day of minicamp. We saw a rotation of Mike when he were at guard, and then Caden Wallace beside him. Is that move more about faith in Chuks Okorafor and Calvin Anderson and less of faith in Wallace? What do we think? That's all. Basically, do we think it's because they're confident in Wallace's ability to play, or do we think it has more to do with the left tackles that they have on the roster who are veterans? Mike, I'll go with you.
I think they like what they have in Okorafor. And I obviously didn't. I think I would have rather a more established left tackle on the market than Okorafor because, he hasn't obviously played the position much, if at all, in the NFL. But I do think that they have faith in him kind of cementing himself as the left tackle. He never really moved off that spot throughout OTAs and minicamp and what have you. I don't think there's a lack of faith in Caden Wallace, but I think with Okorafor there probably for the year and the fact that there's some moving pieces and Cole Strange is out and they're kind of trying to figure out what the perfect best five will be. Okay, if Okorafor is the left tackle, let's use Caden Wallace to our advantage and not just cement him in as the backup left tackle. But hey, if he can serve as a right guard, if he can serve as a right tackle this year, so be it. And we'll kind of go from there. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I do think ultimately from what we've seen, they have faith that Chuks Okorafor is going to be the left tackle for the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say whether, it's about how they feel about Caden Wallace, the left tackle, good or bad, because, we didn't see him play over there in practice. And,
right.
Maybe he was there exclusively the days we weren't there, but that would be kind of weird. So I wonder if it's just about getting Okorafor as many reps as possible and maybe lack of faith, to take this a step further. I wonder if it's about a lack of faith in guys like Nick Leverett, Layden Robinson, Antonio Mafi, like whoever's going to like the second guard option after City So, essentially, and looking at it and saying, well, there's a real chance. Like maybe it's not necessarily primarily about Caden Wallace at all. Maybe it's about there's a real chance we're going to need to move Michael Onwenu back inside. In that case, and Taylor, you had talked about this. In that case, this rookie needs to be prepared to play right tackle because we may need him to go there. So that's honestly kind of how I read it, as more about the guards than anything involving the tackles.
Yeah, I thought it was just them getting their best five. And then that's like, would you rather have Nick Leverett at right guard or Caden Wallace at right tackle, right? And if, again, it's spring, so we'll see how this kind of develops in the summer. But I think this was just them trying to work through some of these rotations, like, hey, what could be our best five? And if that's, Big Mike back inside and Caden Wallace at right tackle, let's get some run with that in the spring right here. So, well, again, that's like such a big thing to watch, especially with the pads come on in the summer. But I think right now they're just trying to find combinations of five that could be their best unit.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, we saw this with like Nate Solder. Obviously, it wasn't like apples to apples, but we saw he was a guy who was a left tackle for the Patriots. But his rookie season, he played a ton of right tackle. I think it was because Sebastian Ballmer got hurt. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Again, we talked about it. They're going to cross-train these guys behind the scenes. Caden Wallace is getting reps at left tackle as well. Whether or not we see them, I think we've seen enough in practice to understand that they really do believe in the philosophy of training these guys to play both sides. And if they are confident in Chuks Okorafor, he's one of the guys that's been steady, if we're being fair. That left side of the offensive line has not been touched. It's really been obviously in David Andrews. But the right side is the one where it seems like there's a lot of tweaking going on. So again, there's only so much you can kind of glean from non-padded practices in the spring. So I don't want to put too much stock into anything that we know about the offensive line. But the fact that They seem confident in Chooks next to City. So I think it's really, like you guys said, Caden Wallace is a guy who spent a 3rd round pick on. He has a lot of experience too. This isn't like, this is why I mentioned experience mattering so much with the recent draft classes, because clearly they like guys who have been playing a little bit longer. Makes it easier to coach because you've seen a lot of football. You're just kind of adjusting to what your specific coaching staff wants to do. And we've seen that Caden Wallace, someone who also took a huge step forward in his development in his final season. So the fact that, again, we've mentioned this already in the past, but he can be on the right side where he's already comfortable, acclimate to the NFL game that way. Then he has that under his belt, and he can be the left tackle of the future. I think athletically, he's more than capable of doing it. Again, he's already been trained that way in college, so it's not a huge deal. But I really do think, Brian, you nailed it. I think it's more about getting your best 5 guys on the field more than it is not being confident in other guys. And Calvin Anderson also, I don't know if you guys saw the video that Borish put in our thread for the questions. It was honestly really interesting. It was talking about how Calvin Anderson basically is just very smart and reacts to stimuli very quickly and is able to adjust on the fly. And he was talking about how going against Von Miller when he was with the Broncos, there'd be times where he would do kind of weird stuff with his body and they would be in film like, why did you do that? And he's just like, my body kind of adjusted because I needed to just figure out how to block him. That was super interesting. A guy I think we're all rooting for after what he went through last year.
He's also really good at the Rubik's Cube, so he definitely has something going on upstairs. That
we have to get him to do that this year. We never got him to do that last year because obviously he was going through a lot of stuff, but we'll bring a Rubik's Cube to training camp. We'll get
that.
Awesome. All right, let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. Been very offense heavy. Do you think that DeMarcus Covington and Gerard Mayo want to be more aggressive and there will be less two-gapping, or do you think they part ways with Godshaw? Alex, I'll go with you first.
They're going to be more aggressive. I mean, they've talked about it, right? DeMarcus Covington talked about it and how they want to be more aggressive coming off the edge. Now, maybe they think Devon Godshaw can be a part of that, and maybe they want him to play more aggressively. Obviously, Bill Belichick spoke very highly of him and his ability to be more than just a run stopper, or just that kind of block eater. I guess I shouldn't say run stopper, but be just that block eater. I guess that'll be tested. That's part of the reason I'm hesitant with his contract. Like, as much as I think it's important he's here this year, I would just give him a raise. I wouldn't necessarily give him extra years because it's almost, even though there's more carryover from last year's coaching staff, it's almost harder to project what the defense is going to look like schematically than the offense, because we know what Alex Van Pelt does, and you figure he's going to come in and just do what he does. Defensively, we don't know, like, how much are they going to carry over from Bill? How much is going to be new philosophy? And from what they've said, I mean, generally it'll probably be the same because they didn't shake the personnel up too much, but like they've talked about this wanting to get more aggressive and play more on field and things like that. And there's been some hints about them maybe doing less two gapping. Godshaw is one of the hardest players to project in this defense. So I think we'll know early on kind of what the deal is for him. And frankly, depending on what happens with his contract, it kind of may be signaled to us earlier than the start of the season what they have in store for him.
Brian, we'll go with you next.
Yeah, I mean, Alex hit most of it there. They've told us they want to be more aggressive. Like, I think Judon was the first one to mention that back at like the combine, or maybe before the combine. He was on 98.5. I think it was with Felger, and he's like, they want to get more aggressive. So we'll see what that means, how that impacts maybe a guy like Godshaw. I would still be surprised if they part ways with Godshaw. You know, Mayo made it seem like they want him around. He said kind of what Bill said. He's one of their better players, and I think they do want to win this year. They don't want to be like completely bottom out and bad, and you know, keeping guys like Godshaw and keeping guys like Judon, some of those veterans on the defense, are going to help you win games. But what is his role? Maybe that evolves. That'll be interesting to see, because I do think they will be, if they keep their promise to us, that they will be more aggressive going forward.
Yeah, I'll be quick. They again, they've mentioned the aggressiveness, and they haven't been I guess as careful with the media as Belichick might have wanted to. So kind of everybody let it slip, and we asked them again, and they kind of said, "Well, we don't know what we're going to do." But I mean, the cat's out of the bag. They're gonna pin their ears back a bit, and I do wonder how that affects Godshaw, because we know he's a run stuffer. He's not great in the pass rush. But Taylor, we've talked about it on here too a couple times now with our defensive line projection, and then we did a whole episode on Godshaw. You kind of have to stop somewhere with paying everybody. Like, they've rewarded the good guys and, you know, the guys who played well, and Godshaw's done just that. But, you know, I think he's 29 going on 30. He's going to want another pay bump. Where he goes, or I guess the amount of money he'll end up making, compared to the other defensive linemen in the NFL and where this team is. And yeah, Brian, you mentioned they want to win, but it's not, I still think that's not priority number one. And it kind of doesn't sound right, but this is a team for 2025. I don't know how much they really care about wins and losses in 2024, as long as they look better on the field. So is Godchaux in your plans for 2025 and beyond? If he's not, you might consider parting ways with them one way or another, whether it's a trade, whether you just don't sign him and he holds out, what have you. Right now, I think he's going to make the roster, but it also isn't going to shock me one bit if they decide not to pay him and they try and figure out something else for him.
Yeah, when it comes to the aggressiveness, it's interesting because they were one of the highest blitzing teams in the league last year. It wasn't like they were necessarily conservative. When it comes to the two gapping, I don't think they're going to want to get rid of that. That still fits what Bentley does. It fits what Jelani Tavai does. And Godchaux is unique. I think, if anything, you maybe guarantee his salary, and then the future you kind of leave up in the air, because he definitely is an outlier on this defense where it's more people who give you pass rush and run defense. And we saw them move on from Lawrence Guy because he was purely a run stopper, and Devon Godchaux similar. But he also is very unique. And he's the only guy who is his size and can eat space the way he does. So I think it makes sense to keep him around at least this year, maybe replace him with someone younger. But I think it would be a mistake to just lean on Jeremiah Farms and Daniel Ekwale, although I do like those guys a lot. So I see them finding some way to make it work with Godchaux this year. In terms of aggressiveness, again, they were pretty aggressive. Part of it was because they didn't have Judon and they needed to manufacture a pass rush. Some of it was in the run defense where you saw Anthony Jennings and Jabril Peppers. A ton of their production was on a specific play where Jennings would kind of knife inside with Jabril Peppers coming around the edge, and they would just meet in the backfield and blow stuff up. So maybe more 4-down fronts. I'm actually studying that right now, how their front mechanics actually worked and what they were doing. 4-man front absolutely works with who they have. It's a lot of 3-3, but a 4-down front where you have a defensive end like a Dietrich Wise or a Keon White as the defensive end, but they can kick inside when Jelani Tavai goes down. So we'll see how that works out, but definitely more aggressive. They've already said it. We're just going to have to see what that looks like. In Godchaux, I think they do figure it out and keep him around this season. What's your ideal cornerback room so far? I feel like we can just kind of blanket Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones. Marcus Jones is in there for sure, but then behind those guys, looks a little bit rockier. So, Brian, I'll start with you. What do you think?
Alex Austin and Isaiah Bolden probably round out that top 5. Tons of versatility there, right? If they want Jonathan Jones on the boundary, you can have Marcus Jones inside. We saw a little Isaiah Bolden in the slot as well. Or, you can move Jonathan Jones back inside where he's kind of been at his best. And but that's if Alex Austin kind of takes that second boundary cornerback spot, or Isaiah Bolden outside, or they haven't been, Bill, maybe they kind of shift, but Bill was never shy of putting Marcus Jones on the boundary either. So they have a lot of talent there. Some of it's young. We'll still have to kind of wait and see how it looks throughout camp there, but they have talent, versatility, and there's still space maybe for a Stephon Gilmore addition if they really want to get kind of all in here. I know that's Barth's guy.
I was going to say, I had a whole thing right there. I was ready to go.
That's his ideal room right there. So, but it's definitely an encouraging and deep room as it sits right now.
Alex, I'll give you the floor to do your Gilmore rant. I'll just quickly say that Bolden / Marco Wilson as kind of that 5th guy, if one of those guys can emerge. If one of the young guys can emerge, then you go get a veteran at Gilmore. Alex, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, if we're talking ideal room, John Jones, Marcus Jones, Christian Gonzalez, Alex Austin, Steph Gilmore, and then if I'm going to keep a 6th is probably Isaiah Bolden because he gives you that flexibility, that inside-outside flexibility. But in that room, you're moving Jonathan Jones back to the inside. So he's now your starting slot corner. You have Gonzalez and Steph Gilmore as your top 2 with Alex Austin kind of in that Jason McCourty role on the boundary. And you have Marcus Jones as kind of a floater. He's in that Miles Bryant hybrid nickel safety kind of role. Boy, you get excited. You get really excited about that room. Now, if Gilmore is not in the picture, a guy I look at is, having maybe some elevated value, and I'd still like Bolden, but a guy I'd look at it as having some elevated value is Marco Wilson. Outside of Jonathan Jones, that is a very, very, very young room. And Marco Wilson isn't exactly an old man, but I think he'd be the second most experienced player of anybody in that group. I believe he was drafted in 2021. So I think just that experience, that kind of experience in that room would be valuable. So even if he's maybe, a tiny bit behind a guy like Mikey Victor or ZZ Hearn in terms of potential, I think having another veteran in there with Jonathan Jones would have some value.
We're missing out on we're failing to mention Marcellus Dial here. Is that an injury thing? Is that because I'm looking at the comments too, and we can kind of tie this in. If you had to pick a player from the 2024 draft to get cut, I feel like if you have to pick one, I think Marcellus Dial leads the conversation right now, and that's nothing against him. You could kind of Foxboro flew the thing. I know he was dealing with something earlier in camp, but I just wanted to kind of give him put his name in the conversation too for cornerbacks.
I mean, he certainly has potential. I think some people hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it because it's true. You can't make the club from the tub, and from a media point of view, out of sight, out of mind. You had corners up and down the roster. Seemingly every day there was a new corner making a push. And we have to talk about those guys. Marcellus Dial just kind of falls aside. So, he's got inside-out versatility. He might have some safety versatility. Definitely a guy that can play on special teams. He'll make a push, but it's just such a crowded room. It's such a crowded room, especially if they add a veteran. It makes it tough to kind of see to do the math for him.
Yeah.
I think that he's kind of in a similar boat to Isaiah Bolden, where you expect them to be special teams guys early on. They have a ton of versatility. They're physical. Marcellus Dial, I think, honestly, not that it helped him, but he's more of a physical guy where what impresses you is his willingness to tackle, get involved in the run game and all that stuff, which I think he'll shine more in training camp. But there are definitely some technical issues where you don't want him to necessarily play right now. You want him on special teams. So I would agree. Joe Milton's the only other guy kind of in the conversation of who might get cut. But even him, I think he's got so much talent. You really don't want to risk putting him on waivers or anything like that or practice squad because he's probably going to get poached. There's a lot of teams that just want at least a developmental guy. So, yeah, Marcellus Dial for sure. And I agree. Like we already mentioned, the Joneses and Gonzalez. Alex Austin has been my guy for a while. I'm really excited to see what he can do. And then Isaiah Bolden, one, because of the special teams value, like we mentioned, but also I think he's just got a physical skill set that they don't really have outside of Christian Gonzalez, where he's big, he's fast, not super fluid, but that's something you can kind of work on and develop in terms of skill to mitigate that. So I would love him to make the roster. Marco Wilson has made his plays. We've seen stuff from ZZ Hearn, Mikey Victor, but I feel like those are the guys that are making a really solid push for the roster. Let's get to one more question from the comments, rounded out with some special teams. Do we feel we have improved in special teams in any way? Does the new format benefit the type of players we have on special teams? Alex, I feel like we got to start with you, right?
They haven't gotten worse. We still don't know who the kicker is, so they haven't gotten better there. As for the kickoff return, kickoff coverage, I hate to cop out. I think it's too early to tell. I'll say this. I do like that they brought back Jalen Reagor. I do like that, they brought in some guys like Mikey Victor, like Marcellus Dial, that we think profile for this. I know I'm somebody who's talked a lot about this player profiles well for the new kickoff rule. We think, because we still haven't seen it in action and we don't really know what it's going to look like. I think they're approaching it the right way. It's too early to say definitively whether or not it will benefit, but everything I've heard players talk about, everything I've heard Jeremy Springer talk about, I feel like they're heading in the right direction. But it's definitely too early to be they totally have this thing figured out, because how the hell would they have it figured out by now?
I do feel like, as the question kind of says, type of players, I feel like they have really good personnel without having a bunch of guys just rostered pure specialists like they have in the past. Marte Mapu, Isaiah Bolden, those are really good special teams players who can also contribute on defense. Jalen Reagor, as you said, even Antonio Gibson probably is really good fit for this type of return. You probably want more of a running back there now with that vision, and he's got good bursts. So I think they do have, I think they do have good types of players for special teams, but we just got to see it. And kicker, it can't get much worse than last year. We hope, no matter who it is, if it's someone on the roster or not on the roster, they were 32nd or 33rd, maybe even in field goal percentage last year. So you hope it can't get worse than that. So hopefully they improve. But yeah, I do think the types of players they have, and Brendan Schooler's still there too. He's kind of the pure one pure specialist. I think they do have some good personnel there to handle that new kickoff rule.
I'll just to answer this one too real quick. How does new kickoff rule impact the kicker competition? This is another one where this is something we're going to have to watch, because this is really I don't think people understand just how new this all is. Like, you're talking about types of kicks. It's like golf, right? You have different kinds of shots, and a good golfer, two good golfers can be good at very different things. We don't know what types of balls they're going to want these guys to kick. We don't know how good they are at these different types of kicks. So will it impact it? Yes. And maybe they both suck and Bryce Behringer is just handling kickoffs. Like, maybe they're going to have different guys handle the kickoff for different kicks. It'll probably impact it. It's way too early to know how.
I'll just add that, Alex, I know you're super excited for it. Brian, I think you are too, as the two sort of special teams gurus in the on the podcast. But I'll just kind of add that, I'm also wicked excited for it, and I kind of hate when people don't like change. I'm very liberal in that. Uniform changes, I'm obsessed with them. I don't care which ones. The Broncos ones with the mile high stuff, everyone hates them. I like them. Let's just have fun. Who cares? Don't get mad at stupid stuff, right? So, I'm looking forward to seeing how teams adjust, the lineup. That first kickoff, I'm going to be, chomping at the bit to be how are they going to do this? And the other thing I'll add, too, is, we didn't see Isaiah Bolden return a kickoff during the offseason program. He was one of the best kick returners in college football 2 years ago. I'm excited to see that. I want to see – I don't know if they're working him back still. I don't know if they're hiding him. I don't know if they don't want to put him out there, but – that can add to that last cornerback discussion, where if he can add, kick return value, is he still good at kick returns in this new format? That's all stuff we're going to have to wait and see. So the only point I wanted to add was just kind of that I'm excited to see it all play out, because change is good. Change is fun. I don't care if it's football. Football doesn't always have to be the same. They changed the extra point. Everyone was BS about it. It turned out fine. It added a little element. Let's have some fun.
Remember, they change. I mean, these things are changing all the time. Remember, the goalpost used to be in the end zone. It was before any of us were alive. But
right.
They still have that. I kind of don't like that. I totally understand why they changed it. It's dangerous. But if you watch in Canada where they play, the goalpost is still in front. There are certain route combinations that only exist in the end zone that involve using the goalpost as a screen.
Right.
Imagine getting to scheme that. Imagine seeing Andy Reid scheme up using the goalpost for screens.
Yeah.
How cool.
They're doing not a ring around the rosy around the goalpost.
Right. Like a basketball screen. Right. So that's the thing. It's it's a new thing. You dig in and what works and what doesn't. You get to see really how well you understand the nuances of the game. It's a challenge, because the thing about this kickoff, and I've said this a lot, but it really resembles a scrimmage play. It almost kind of sets up like the old Wildcat plays.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how that translates.
Yeah. It's a play again, and it's nice that the Patriots have, it feels like, multiple people who could at least excel in that kind of role. I really have nothing else to add. So I will move on to the Boston Sports Minute. Fellas, busy day. Let's talk about it. Who wants to start?
I guess I'll start. We might as well start with the Celtics, right? Because they had the most jarring news. I think it's the first time in over 20 years that a Boston sports team is going to be up for sale. Although we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, because the Celtics are owned a group called Boston Basketball LLC, which is basically Wyc Grousbeck, Irv Grousbeck, Steve Pagliuca, a couple other rich people. They all own it together. So that group is the majority owner, but within that group, Wyc Grousbeck is the controlling. He runs that, but Steve Pagliuca is a managing partner. So Wyc says he's going to sell the team. Now we find out an hour ago that Steve Pagliuca is going to bid on the team. So maybe after all this hoopla, nothing changes. But you look at the extensions the Celtics have signed. Derek White got $20 million today. Jason Tatum got $315 million. He's going to be the highest paid player in NBA history, or at least is right now. Probably won't be by the time that contract kicks in. But they've just been handing out future dollar after future dollar. And I mean, look, Wyc probably has more money in his change drawer than I'll ever see in my life. But in terms of sports owners, you kind of have to be a billionaire to own a team in the NBA and NFL at this point, and Wick's just not there. So I was wondering, as they were handing all these extensions out, like, where's this extra money going to come from? Are they going to, maybe sell a stake of the team? We're seeing the Buffalo Bills do that right now, where I'm blanking on the owner's name, but they're still, the Pagulas are still going to be the majority owner, but they're diluting their share. But now it looks like Wick's selling. Does Pagliuca have the money? Maybe. He's co-chairman of Bain Capital. I have to imagine that pays pretty well. But, you also start thinking about who else could get involved. A lot of people went right to casino magnates, which would make a lot of sense for a number of reasons in Boston. John Henry's name came up, which is freaking terrifying.
God.
There's
so
always...
all right, I'll throw this in the ring then, because I saw, I think it was Ravel, one of those sports business guys. It was either him or Popliano or whatever. But like, do you think there's already a backdoor plan in place for the next ownership?
Yes.
Because they're handing out all these contracts. They're already giving Tatum and Brown 300 plus. They're giving Derek White 125 now. Drew Holiday is on the hook for a lot. Porzingis was like 60 million over 2 years. So like, you can't just, give away all this debt and put yourself in all this debt and then think you're going to sell the team. Like, that doesn't make the team, more value. Like, doesn't help the value of the team.
On top of that, they put in the release, like, the exit plan for like Wick is right? laid out. Yeah, it's right. The sale's going to be mostly completed by late 2024, early 2025. Wick will remain on as governor which basically means league representative until 2028. Right. So, but the other thing it tells you is that whoever's buying in has deep pockets. I don't think this is going to be a case like we saw with the Minnesota Timberwolves, or we thought we might see with the Washington Commanders, where you get like a couple of celebrities get together, they pool their money with one or two investors. Like, I had the thought earlier today of like, all right, does Tom Brady go get Michael Rubin and his resources and try to put a group together? But Henry fits the bill, man. Henry fits the bill. That one's scary. And then I know there's rules.
The Saudis?
So that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, they're playing over there, aren't they?
Yeah,
they are playing over there next year. They're playing a couple preseason games. That thing is always lingering. Now, there are currently rules against the Saudis owning an NBA team, but the general consensus has always sort of been, that there's a timer on that, and eventually the money was just going to become so extreme that do the Saudis get involved? So then you find out today Pagliuca is going to try to buy his way back in. It's I'm fascinated with this. I think it's incredibly interesting. Anybody but John Henry. And I know we talked about some other people that are questionable, but the reality is somebody tweeted this day, whoever buys the Celtics probably is going to have some skeletons in their closet. Like, that's just, you don't get that much money without doing that. So if it's going to be somebody like that, can they at least care about the team?
There was a tweet
not
today.
Care enough about the money that's involved.
It was Jason Tatum in a Lakers uniform, and it said the second John Henry buys the Celtics that this is going to happen. So
I will say the one I got this question once today, because he does have the pockets for it, at least from the outside looking in, we think he does. It's reported is Kraft. I think he's a Patriots fan through and through. I think he's kind of busy with them, and since it is Patriots beat Patriots Day, they'll bring that up. I'd be very surprised if we hear about Kraft. Henry just because of the way he operates, Henry makes a lot more sense. Kraft is similar to Wick in that, like, he's a fan that owned the team.
Well, and too, Henry's already gotten himself into the hockey game. He said he wanted to buy an NBA team at some point. There was rumors of like a Vegas team or something he would get involved in, but this would make a ton of sense.
There are rules. I forget if it's the NBA or the NHL, but one of the leagues has a rule about if you are going to own multiple teams, they can't be in competing markets. So the Celtics are a unique opportunity for John Henry, where he owns the baseball team. So that's not a conflict of interest. And there is no basketball team in Pittsburgh. So that's not a conflict of interest. So Vegas.
What about LeBron?
So that there's another element to that, right? Because LeBron can't own the Celtics. And as long as LeBron is playing, Fenway Sports Group can't buy the Celtics, but there are ways around that. One, LeBron temporarily cashes out. We saw Jay-Z do this when he was an owner of the Nets, when he wanted to start his agency, right? Rock Nation. The other thing is, it's laid out in that statement that the sale is going to happen in phases. And what if John Henry, not Fenway Sports Group, John Henry makes the initial purchase for the first year. Then LeBron James retires, And now, wouldn't you look at that? Fenway Sports Group creates a transaction. Like, there's a million ways around that. But yeah, John Henry and LeBron James owning the Celtics. Don't like that.
Do we have to trade for Bronny then if LeBron owns the Celtics?
Oh man,
I'm
probably,
down.
right?
All right, we'll give the floor to Brian Hines for the Bruins stuff because he's our Bruins representative. They made some moves today too.
Oh man, kind of disappointing, honestly. I think the Bruins just exists now to disappoint me. But
what did you want?
I wanted
or is it too much money for them?
I don't like. So they got Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov long deals, like the term, which that's free agency nowadays. Same as like any sport, you have to overpay these guys. They're good players at positions of need. They're going to make them harder, tougher to play against. But the Zadorov contract, like they needed top 6 winners. They needed scoring, and to put $5 million on the back end, where I thought there were cheaper left shot defensemen out there, guys who got bought out the past few days, other veteran free agents. I thought you could have got a guy who fit just as well as Zadorov, who, again, I think if you pair him with McAvoy, that could really elevate his game. But I think, get Lindholm, that's fine, but they needed another top 6 forward. And it's just blank right now. Like, they're going to try to go in the season with Fabian Lysell or Merkulov. And if the kids hit, great, that raises your ceiling. But if not, we're going to be back where we always were and scoring 2 goals a game. And we'll talk to you at the trade deadline when we have to trade a first-round pick for probably an overrated right winger there. So
2024 Rick Nash.
Yeah, the allocation of resources there, and maybe it works. Maybe one of the kids is great, or Sweeney was talking today that they think adding on the back end is going to kind of open things up. Let Charlie McAvoy play more offensively. Lohrei and Lindholm, we can take more of an offensive centered focus. Hampus Lindholm, that is. And I mean, Elias Lindholm, you hope he gets back to kind of his 2 years ago playing with Pasta. Maybe he gets, back to 60, 70, 80 points, and that helps your offense. But I think they would have been better off using that $5 million on another top 6 forward and kind of, because, the defense was fine. And Lohrei could play a top 4 role. I think they would have just been better shelling out those resources in a different way.
See, I like Zadorov. I like that sign. Now, my big problem is I think the term's too long. I think the term is too long.
Absurd.
He's 6, right? And Lindholm 7?
7, and they're both 30. This is where I go back to the trade they made last week. And did they really have to eat up $3 million of Korpisalo? Because that's the $3 million, Brian, for the winger you're talking about.
Yeah.
Also, if they have to eat the money, if they end up with Chychrun instead of Korpisalo,
who, by the way, Ottawa got fleeced in the Jakob Chychrun trade today.
But like
where was that a week ago?
They could have made the 2 moves they made today, still had Chychrun. Talk about a great defense. And then maybe you add the winger or not. But they've gotten bullied out of the playoffs the last 2 years. They've got just bullied, just the physicality of the postseason. And it's more than the last 2 years. They have not been able to rise to the physicality of the postseason. That has been a problem for a long time. And Zadorov, bully. Dude, even the kid they drafted, Lindholm can hit a little bit.
Barth texted me when they drafted the kid and goes, they drafted Joe Milton because he's 6'7".
He's got all the tools. He's got all the tools.
He was like big in a project, but
no.
But the point being, like, I didn't want to see them just add a bunch of dinky skill guys that were going to get punched in the mouth all playoffs. I'm glad that's what they do, and it's annoying. I'm glad they added some size. Do they need a wing? Yes. I know you kind of rolled your eyes at the deadline, but that's not – look, if they didn't do that, we'd be sitting here saying, well, now they need to add an enforcer at the deadline. Now they need to go try to do Patrick Maroon again. And how did that go? So maybe it's not a first. Maybe add a little bit of a lesser pick. I like giving the kids a chance. It's better than burying them forever, which this team did for a long time. I don't hate what they did today, given, what their resources were. Again, the term's a little long. It all comes back to, you could argue today was the overcorrection of mistakes in the draft, mistakes in trades, and it certainly was. But I think for the spot they put themselves in, they did fine. They did relatively okay. I like that they added bullies. I like that they added physicality. And it's just, they got to figure out that wing, and we'll see what they do. I'm fine if they didn't overpay DeBrusque, right? And maybe they go right up against the cap. Maybe one of these kids hit. Maybe they make a trade. Taylor, any thoughts on any of this?
I just agree so wholeheartedly with everything everyone has said. I can't pick.
Well, any
Nothing more
thoughts?
to add.
I mean, you got into the Celtics there during the playoffs. Derek White extension. He's here for 4 years. Tatum's here for 5. That starting lineup's back together. It costs $939 million. It's basically the GDP of a small country. But
Not
I
our
think I already
money.
made that joke.
I don't know who the hell's going to pay it, but that's not my problem.
Exactly.
My back, so I'm happy. I'm good with it. All right. Anything else before we wrap up?
I think that's it, right?
I don't know. My only
Red Sox do
positive
anything?
Bruins was Matt Poitras skated today, and he put on 9 pounds of muscle. So he's our savior. He's the Bruins savior.
I'll say it's about the Red Sox.
boy.
Why do we buy in on them? We knew this is what they do. They're perpetually 500. Sucks.
Yep.
This is what John Henry cannot buy the Celtics. I cannot take 2 of my teams being like this. I can't do it.
I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be, but I don't think John Henry ends up doing it. I think there's already a plan in place, whatever it may be. So I think that's it. What else we got? Nothing?
John Henry.
No more Boston sports?
No.
Taylor has
summer.
to repeat all of those takes.
It's just
Go.
going to turn into me yelling about John Henry some more.
Did anybody watch the Rocket Mortgage Classic this weekend?
No.
I just saw the missed putt on 18.
Yeah, I bet Akshay Bhatia before Sunday, and his first 3 putt of the entire weekend was on 18, and he lost. It was terrible. He was up by 1.
New home run derby rules. And by new, I
yeah.
mean they're starting to go back to the old rules, which were better, which is good.
Just bring back outs. That's all we want.
Yeah.
Outs.
Bring back outs. Well, they went back to get rid of the stupid freaking bracket, which was annoying.
Yeah.
Yes, now we got to get them to go back to outs. They're still on the timer. There's nothing like 45 minutes of Bobby Abreu just popping balls in a right field at Yankee Stadium. I'm sorry, it's a Monday night in July. No, I don't have anywhere better to be. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm having a beer. I'm watching guys hit dingers. I'm perfectly happy. If it runs over 20 minutes, 30 minutes, so be it. You're not losing my business.
I'm with you.
True.
Hell yeah, brother. All right. We're gonna wrap this up. Everybody, we're gonna go left to right. Please let the people know what great stuff y'all got coming down the pipeline. And I might look different for everybody. So Mike, we're starting with you.
Patriots depth projection is in full force on the CLNSmedia.com website, going through every position group leading up to training camp. Safeties were today, running backs are Wednesday. Me and Taylor are gonna figure out a way to get that up on the YouTube site as well. We'll go through those position groups. So find it all on Twitter at Mike Kadlick and the work at CLNSmedia.com.
985thesportshub.com. Honestly, it's mostly Celtic stuff up there today for me, but I am starting to work on some of my training camp stuff. That'll mostly be up next couple of weeks. We'll start getting there. I'm working on one storyline to watch for each position, not including position battles, because then I'm doing the biggest position battles and also surprise players that can make a roster push. So that'll be on the way. Also, new Catch 22 coming tomorrow with Evan at 10 a.m.
Yep. patspulpit.com. Obviously, it's slow, but we'll start to have some of the training camp preview stuff coming up at I am Brian Hines on Twitter. And I believe Barth will probably be on Wednesday for our second Pat's beat before the holiday weekend. So make sure everyone tunes into that.
And at Pat's Daily, we have a video coming out tomorrow. I interviewed Brandon Thorne, offensive line guru, my go-to for anything offensive line related. We broke down his rankings for the Patriots offensive line. They weren't great, but we broke down why that is. Also, really talked about every player that's projected to make this roster, reasons to be excited, reasons to be, a little skeptical. Really great conversation. Brandon Thorne is always a great interview. Thank y'all. As always, this was a fun mailbag crossover. It always is. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time. Peace, y'all.
Right.